Hi, beautiful people. I'm Shanika.
I'm Chloe.
I'm Corey.
I'm Kelsey, and we are Mutha.
We are Black mothers
and artists in a big city.
Navigating motherhood for the first time.
Through a pandemic.
Sharing our personal experiences, the sweet moments with the kiss, mwah,
and all the shit they don't tell you.
Motherhood.
Raw.
Undressed.
And unapologetic.
This journey can be a mother.
Shut your mouth.
This is Mother.
All right. Hey, ladies. How y'all doing today?
Good.
I'm so happy to see your faces per usual and hear your voices, we should say, for all our podcast followers. Last week was great. I really enjoyed that episode, just talking about the Black mom experience, because that perspective so often is just left out of the conversation of motherhood and parenting. So I was very grateful for that. Today, what we're going to be talking about is we've titled this episode "The First 48." First 48, and talking about that postpartum time, which, just for our listeners, this was something that actually centered us and inspired us to do this podcast, was the conversation about that postpartum time and just how it kind of caught a lot of us off guard. And we didn't really know what to expect. We thought we knew what to expect, but when it came down to it, we actually didn't know what to expect. And we just came together and really was each other's support system, getting a lot of advice from one another. And what we realized, we were just like, damn, there's just a lot of shit that, people didn't tell us that we wish they had told us. So it's so interesting that now we are here and we just want to share our experience and our advice and thoughts about that time period. And today we're joined, it's me, Shanika, and
Corey and Chloe.
Yeah, chatting with you guys today. So the first question I would like to ask is, within that first 48 hours of motherhood, how did it happen? How did it happen? What was like the literal and physical transition into motherhood? How did that manifest for you?
It's a loaded question. Well, for me, I felt like there really wasn't a transition. It kind of just was like, and now you have a baby, because I had a home birth. So I gave birth to my son on the 29th of December at home. And my midwife and doula were here for probably about 4.5 hours after he was born, like helping clean everything up and get us all situated. They helped me take a shower and all that stuff. And then, we kind of they weighed him, they did all the standard things. And then they handed him to us and they're like, okay, bye. And we were like, me and my husband are just laying in our bed and we're like, well, I guess I did the thing, I gave birth and now I'm a mom. And it just felt like such a abrupt transition. There was no easing into it kind of situation. It was very much now we're in the thing, we're doing it. And I just felt on a high for those first 2 days too. I just was FaceTiming everyone. I'm pretty sure I FaceTimed half of New York on that first night. I was like, hey, here's the baby. Look, it's so exciting. And I'm a mom now, blah, blah, blah. And I just was on one those first 2 days. And then right after that was the epic crash that I'm sure most moms that are listening probably know about, after you hit that wall and you're like, oh crap, I'm tired. I'm in pain. I'm all of those things. But it was a very abrupt kind of transition for me, for sure.
It's so interesting that you say the part about them just sort of giving you the baby, especially for me and Chloe. I'm sure you probably can relate to this too. With us, those of us that are in the city, in New York City, and don't have any families close by, that is oh God, okay, now it's real. Now we have this baby in our hand. I don't have mom, I don't have grandma, I don't have auntie, all these people that normally would be surrounding you, to kind of help out with those first 48 hours. It was just us, like you said. And I know you guys have a little bit of family in the city. But when you said that, it made me think about like, damn, yeah, it was kind of like they just handed you to a baby and was like, okay, good luck, bye, see you later. But anyways, Chloe, what about you?
So my biggest journey, which we will discuss next week, which I'm excited for, was breastfeeding. Like that, as anyone that's watching can see, if you're on the podcast, I'm currently breastfeeding and she is nearly 11 months. So it's been a great journey now, but it was hell at the beginning. And so I think like for me, the first 48, I feel like I was just on autopilot of like I literally had one goal, and that was like feed my child. So I just feel like I can't necessarily say I was like taking in like how I was feeling about motherhood. I just was like on like this mission of like, I need to be able to feed my child. And she was so small, which I feel like all of our kids are pretty small, right? Because she weighed 6 pounds, 2 ounces, or like nearly 6 pounds, 2 ounces. And I think like, yeah, they're all similar sizes, right?
Yeah, Carver was 6 pounds flat.
Yeah, yep. Grant was 6 pounds as well.
Yeah, it's so
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
Yeah.
But you know what? That's actually kind of comforting because, you know, everybody's like, oh, they're so tiny. But it's like, I actually know like 5 other moms who had 6 pound babies. I'm grateful to not have a 10 pound, you know, like 10 pound baby. To go through that situation.
She's like, yeah, that's me. Ha ha ha. You say hello? Yeah, we're talking about you, Missy. Yeah. So I think like it was like insane because they had to check her every 3 hours, or was it 2 hours? They had to do this like prick thing, like for her blood glucose. So they were checking her glucose, and then I had to feed her. So I mean, I was not sleeping. They would wake me up all the time, just being like, "You need to feed her now." Oh no, they wouldn't wake me up because I was just like in my own, you know, as we all know. But like they would wake her up every 2 hours because they had to do this glucose thing, and I had to feed her. And so I just felt like she wasn't getting sleep, but that's, I guess, normal at the beginning. And then because she wouldn't latch, I literally was just like getting any colostrum I could. I mean, didn't even know like what colostrum was or whatever. But, and like literally I was feeding her like a drop on my finger. Again, we'll talk more about that. But all to say is that I feel like I was very much just like on a mission. And so I feel like I didn't have the capacity to really like think about any of the other stuff that comes with like having a newborn. Yeah, and it is that thing of like you're on this crazy high, and I feel like I was on this crazy high for maybe like 2 weeks, and then I came crashing down. But yeah,
because Chloe, didn't you say you were like baking muffins and stuff like days?
Made muffins and was like my upstairs neighbors, hey, do you want some muffins? And they were like, what?
They're like, don't you have a newborn?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Then it all came crashing down. However, I will say like I was really lucky because I had a pretty good birthing experience. In terms of like, you know, like not being on loads of drugs and not having like anything where I was like in a lot of physical pain. So that was actually really nice being able to, you know, come out of the hospital like, okay, you know? So I feel lucky I had that. I didn't have any of that because the breastfeeding was like so insane. And I think if I'd have had to deal with like, I mean, obviously I was like hurting, but not hurting too much. So that I could focus on the breastfeeding.
Totally. For me, when I think about that time, interesting enough, it actually has something not to do with the baby. Like when it really clicked for me wasn't even right after the birth or the first feed or anything. It was when I took my first shower. I took my first shower, and it was like the first moment that I had to just soak up what just happened to me, what I just went through, what the experience was. And it was like my first moment by myself with nobody around, just me and God. And I really soaked up like, wow, I'm a mom. I really just gave birth, and I am now a mom, and life is different. And I did feel like a very visceral sort of physical transitioning happening within my body, within my spirit. It was very interesting. I felt like I could feel the change happening physically to me. Like after even after the physical labor of actually giving birth, that was the moment for me. Because when he first came out and they laid him on my chest, it still felt surreal. It still didn't feel like that actually happened. But for some reason, when I took that first shower and I could barely walk, which we will talk about next, when I got my way to the shower and I took my first shower, that was the moment for me where, the literal and physical manifestation of like, oh, wow, I'm a mom. That's when it happened for me. I want to talk about what was the unexpected thing, and what did you think life was going? What did you think life was going to be like, or what your month was going to be like? The first 48 hours, or you just gave birth. You're off the high, and then now the reality is kicking in. What did you think that month was going to be like for you, and what was it actually? What was the unexpected like?
I think I had absolutely no idea what it was going to be like. I don't think I had any preconceived notions about what it could be, because I had never gone through the process with someone else before. Like, some people, like my husband, he has younger siblings. So for him, he remembers very distinctly when his little sister came home and like experiencing being around a newborn baby in those first couple of days. I've never had that experience before. So for me, it was like, I really felt like I was learning on the job about like just how to take care of a baby. Like, what does a baby need? How much do they sleep? Like, how often am I supposed to feed them? Obviously, in those first couple of days, like the milk comes in and like all these things are just sort of happening to you. I don't know if y'all can identify with that, but I just sort of felt like every day I was waking up and like something else was happening to my body that I couldn't control. And so I just felt like I ended up in this moment where, and I think as a dancer too, it felt really scary to feel like all these things were happening that you couldn't sort of navigate and control yourself.
Yeah, totally.
And I just like, my body, I would wake up in these crazy sweats every night. Like I was sweating profusely. Like my sheets would be soaked every morning when I woke up. And then like my boobs were so painful. And like when he was latching in the beginning, it felt like somebody was actually just like sawing my nipple off. I was like, this hurts so bad. And it's just like, there were so many things, but I also was like, he has to eat. So this is just like what I have to endure. And my midwife also had advised for me to pretty much stay in bed for that first week because I had gotten stitches and stuff. And she was like, you're going to make a recovery a lot harder if you try to get up and move around too soon. So really only get up to go to the bathroom and go back to your bed. So that was also challenging because in my mind, I guess I don't even think I realized that I thought that I was going to be this way, but I like the house came crushing down pretty fast when I was like, oh, I'm not just going to like give birth and then be doing jumping jacks on day 2. Like I'm going to be in the bed and watching Real Housewives and just sitting and feeding my baby and then trying to sleep whenever I can. So I think I just had like a little bit of a harsh reality in that front because I was like, oh, well, I've been working out my whole pregnancy. I was dancing. I was doing all these things. So like, surely I'm just going to give birth and then be able to go about my way. And it definitely was not that.
Yeah, I totally, that I identify with this because you are the reason for helping me get over that hump with the beautiful advice of how to comfort myself that you gave me, which we will share next, some little tips. But for me, I think TV and film completely ruined this for me. Completely ruined it for me because for so long, we've seen women on TV and in film just kind of like they have the baby and then they pop out the hospital and they're just joyful and bouncing around and, not saying that there isn't any joy there, but what are we doing on this podcast? We want to give you all the real, the raw. You know what I mean? So with the intention of empowering you and inspiring you so you have the knowledge And then therefore, you know how to comfort yourself after this, because that was the biggest thing for me. I really was a little upset that I didn't have the knowledge of how to comfort myself. I knew that this was going to be a challenging thing. I knew that I may face some challenges. And like you said, being dancers, we are not against having a challenge. We are used to our bodies going through craziness, in order to achieve a particular goal. So that wasn't, it just was the fact that I couldn't comfort myself. I didn't know how to comfort myself because I too had stitches, Corey. And I pushed my baby out in 10 minutes. So you can imagine what the factory ended up being like after, pushing out a baby in 10 minutes. Okay. And I thought I was going to come out and I was going to be fine because I did yoga, I did Pilates, I worked out my entire pregnancy, which everybody tells you working out is supposed to make things easier. And I think in a way I did benefit from that. However, I came out and I was in a wheelchair. I couldn't even walk. I couldn't even really lift my foot up off the ground. I couldn't get in my bed. I had to sleep in my recliner chair for 3 weeks because I couldn't get in my bed. And yes, of course, everybody's postpartum experience is different, because I even asked my mom and some other women that I look up to that I'm very close to, like, why didn't anybody talk about these things? Why isn't this a normalized discussion within our culture, within our society? And a lot of people say they don't want to traumatize you, or they don't, or everybody's experience is different. But the way, the perspective that I look at it as is, it's not you're traumatizing me, but you're empowering me so that I can have some knowledge. And then you can give me tips on, this is what I did to comfort myself or to get through this mentally, spiritually. I read this, I journaled this, those types of things. That's why I like to hear those real stories. And so that's why I'm sharing this perspective with our listeners. And so that was the unexpected for me. I didn't expect to not be able to walk. I didn't expect to not be able to hold my baby. I didn't expect to come out a little sad, you know what I mean? Because I was so excited about being a mother and so excited about having my son here and taking this journey. And I really do credit my spirituality and my family and my husband for just keeping me lifted during that time and not letting me get into a dark place. Because part of me feels like the reason some people do start to experience that type of dark space is, one, because of the lack of empowerment and the lack of knowledge of knowing what to do in these moments, but also just maybe not having the necessary support to keep them lifted and to keep them in a positive headspace, because it is a lot. It is a transition. And as much as you are excited and happy about the journey, you do have to recognize that your body is going to go through something. Even if you have a cesarean, or, even if your postpartum time isn't what ours is, you still go through a physical change. A lot is changing very quickly. And so that for me was the unexpected, especially because I consider myself to be a very in-tuned person. I really latch on to anything that's going to take my brain into a positive thinking space. So to even feel like I couldn't even control that was challenging. So when you say like you couldn't control the physical things that was happening, it was shocking to me. I couldn't control the mental and spiritual things that were happening for me, especially being that I consider myself to be a pretty positive person. It was a little scary. It was a little scary because I didn't know that I could feel, sadness in a moment of so much joy, in the midst of a moment of so much joy. So it was almost like emotionally confusing. But like I said, having that support system and having some spirituality to latch on to during that time was very helpful. So yeah, that was what it's for me. I thought I was going to be skipping out and doing jumping jacks too, Corey.
What was unexpected for me is that like I've always wanted to have kids. So I thought it would come naturally to me. And I think what was kind of unexpected is that it really takes time to find your relationship with your child, or at least for me. And it was something, and maybe it's because I had, this girl is teething like a crazy lady, and I'm probably gonna have to run after her in a minute. But yeah, I think what I really struggled with is because, again, like for women, you know, you've given birth, you are dealing with trying to feed a new baby, and also your own body is trying to recover. And so I just found that there was no space for anything else. Like I just had no space to really think about even like loving my daughter. Obviously, like I did, but the kind of the natural like thoughts that I thought I would have of just being like so obsessed with my baby and all of that, it wasn't there. And I think it's just because I just did not have the capacity to think about that. And I think it was quite hard at the beginning because Kyle, my husband, was so incredible with her. Like he was amazing at like, I remember, you know, she'd be crying or whatever, or we'd be trying to get her to sleep, and Carl would just be like, just talk to her, you know, and he would so easily just be able to talk to her about anything and everything. And I don't know, I'm a chatterbox, and I found it so hard. I didn't even know what to say. It was so bizarre. And I think that is definitely something that I wasn't prepared for because, you know, obviously everyone's like, oh, your baby's, you know, you think about your baby being so cute and lovable, and you've like carried this thing for 9 months. You think you would automatically have a bond. And I do remember one of my friends, her baby is now 5, I want to say. And I remember it being hard for her at the beginning, but I didn't really understand it. And I think it's really hard to understand until you've gone through it yourself. And now I totally get it. And I'm just like, oh man, I wish I was there for her more at the beginning. But it's kind of like a weird concept to get until you're going through it. And so I think it is that thing. And there's nothing to be ashamed of because you are literally on such a mission. You know, your hormones are changing. Your body's like just gone through a massive trauma. You're healing and you're trying to breastfeed, like all of those things. So yeah, I think that was like the big unexpected for me is just, did anyone else also just feel like you were in a jail cell? And I felt like I was in this weird, like, you know, Kyle was a prison officer coming in being like, she's hungry.
Yes.
And just like, sleep. And you're like, okay, gotta like, I just was like, I'm just a prisoner to this baby.
Yes. And you know, I felt so bad for feeling that way. Like, I felt like, am I a horrible mom because I actually feel like my child is Wayne calls him Little Thor, like from the Marvel movies. Like he just comes in and he's just like, or Thanos. He calls him Thanos. He's like coming in and like he rules everything. That's what I felt like too. I was just like, is there going to be any room for me in this house? That was like a huge thing that I was suffering with for a little bit of just like, I feel like I have absolutely no concept of who Corey is as an individual person anymore. It's like now I'm a milk machine. Like I'm actually providing sustenance for my child. I'm trying to keep him alive. And I really don't actually know what I'm trying to do for myself. Like I can't even go to the bathroom. I can't take a shower. Like I can't do any of these things that I would normally do every day to take care of myself. Now I'm like, those things feel like they're not important anymore, even though they were super important. Yeah. So
well, like, it's also like, everyone's like, just sleep when the baby sleeps. But I'm like, but I want to feel like I want to feel like a human being. And if I just sleep when the baby sleeps, then I'm even more a prisoner to her. I have no time to do anything for myself or even just like watch a TV program. I feel like that's also something that I would like, you know, soon to be moms or parents to think about too, is like, yes, it's super important to get your rest in, but you also need moments of feeling like yourself amongst the chaos. And Corey, we actually spoke about this yesterday, that thing of, I'm so grateful that Campbell is a summer baby, because just being able to go out for a walk in the sun at the beginning was so amazing. And I can't imagine how hard it was for you two I mean, I'm a January baby, so I'm sure I can ask my mom. But like, yeah, it's just so hard if you can't even just get out the house just to like get some fresh air and some sun in your face.
Yes.
Especially considering the fact that our pregnancies were during the pandemic. So we already had been spending so much time in the house.
Yep.
I don't know about you, but by myself most of the time because my husband worked.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like that. And then now I'm stuck. And we all are city people. So we're in our 1-bedroom apartments with, just the baby to hold, all of these. I'm so happy to hear you say that because I do relate to that of feeling like, am I going to have a moment to myself? Is anything going to be mine again? And we want to tell you listeners that you do eventually, it does eventually figure itself out. You guys find your groove and you figure out what works for you. Everybody's going to have their opinion about how to do it and how to, you have to dedicate. Some people dedicate all the time. And then some people are like, oh no, I have to, but you have to find what works for you. And I really do feel like, and our kids are now in month 4, me and Corey, and Campbell is now 11 months. She will be 1 very soon. And we can tell you that you really do find your groove and you do get that space. But yes, the milk machine was what it was for me, honestly, because, and I just kept, especially when they're going through, what do they call it? When they're feeding back to back to back to back to back. What is it called? Cluster feeding. Yes. When they are cluster feeding.
It's horrible.
That was like, oh my gosh, every hour, on the hour, every 30 minutes, on the 30 minutes. And
I never had that.
You didn't?
Oh.
No, well, we had our own issues, which again, I'll be speaking about next week on the breastfeeding episode. But yeah, because of her tongue tie and lip tie issue, she just was like tired, like she got tired from feeding. So I was always jealous actually when I spoke to this other mom and like who had a baby around the same time and she was going on about this cluster feeding and I was like so jealous because like all I wanted was for Campbell to eat more. Especially because she was so small. It's just hilarious, isn't it? Like what's one person's thing that's just like, oh my gosh, I wish this would stop. And then like the other parent is she's and then and then I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so jealous that like your baby's eating all the time.
Yeah.
Well, but that's what made me, but like Corey said, that's what made me feel bad because I kept thinking about like there are women who can't breastfeed or who are having challenges. And here I am. That was another conundrum, emotional, mental conundrum that I was going through in my mind because I'm like, I want to be grateful for this. But at the same time, I feel like my boobs are going to fall off and I can't get any space to just even think, and then I ended up going through a moment of low supply. So then I thought I was being punished, for feeling the way that I felt. And I cried then too, but once again, I think that comes from not knowing. And I read the books. Okay. I read all the books there are to read, the books, the what to expect when expecting, nurture books that I highly recommend. Actually, I'll show you show them to you. I recommend these books and I feel like they do a beautiful job of explaining things, but it still is different when you get in that freaking moment and you actually really understand what cluster feeding is. And you really understand, you even really understand what freaking a contraction feels like. Because the way it was described to me
Nope.
was not what it actually was.
And if anyone ever asked me to describe it to them, I'd be like, I'm not going to describe it to you because I can't. And anything that I would say to you would not be the truth and it would be setting you up for failure. So I can't.
I feel like I try and remember how it felt. And honestly, I can't.
Me either. I can't either. I think it's totally biological. Otherwise, people would never procreate ever again because it's like I feel like it happened instantly. Like obviously my body was in pain, but I had been going through contractions for 23 hours and you're telling me I cannot describe what it felt like and I actually can't.
See, now I can remember what it felt like. I can't remember how long it happened because for me, from point A to B, it felt to me like that was only a couple hours. When in reality, it started when I was cooking dinner and I didn't deliver my baby to the next day. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I can't, like, you know how people are like, I was in labor with you for 20 hours.
Yes.
I can't remember how many hours. I just know that but I can remember the feeling. So that's very interesting. Very interesting. But the next thing I want to talk about, which I think is like the bulk of why we're doing this, right? To give the tips, to give advice where we can. Again, we will full disclaimer, this advice that we are giving, these tips that we are giving are pure, our bias, are from personal experience. We are not saying that we are experts. However, we have experienced it and we want to be able to share these things with people. Just ladies, what are some tips, some advice that you would like to give the listeners for going through these first 48, for going through postpartum time, to comfort themselves, to give them mental, spiritual health? What would you like to offer up?
Well, I think one thing that we were kind of touching on a little bit in the last question was, and one thing that if I could do it all over again, or if I have another child, one thing I would really prioritize would just prioritize what works for me. Because I feel like a lot of people share their opinions about what you should and shouldn't be doing. And specifically when it's your first baby, like, you know, your family, specifically your family all have very strong opinions about like, don't sleep with the baby in the bed. You're going to spoil the baby if you're holding the baby too much. You need to sleep when the baby sleeps. All these sorts of things that are like kind of generalizations that ultimately, like, yes, they could work for some people, but they don't work for others. And like, you know, specifically with the sleep with when the baby sleeps kind of thing, which I fully understand. Part of that for me was making me more depressed because of like what Chloe was saying, where I just felt like, well, then where do I fit in? Like, I'm literally still operating based off of my child's schedule and what they want to do. But what about like, if I just literally want to sit and watch TV, or I want to read a book, or I want to do whatever, like that is important too. And that's important to fill your own cup as a mother. And I think that was something that I didn't really do as much of, and I'm trying to prioritize now for almost 5 months in, of like really isolating time for myself, whether it's to go work out, whether it's just going on a walk, listening to a podcast, whatever it is that is equally as important as rest. It's equally as important as keeping your child alive. Like all of those things are equally important. And I think I just really let myself get lost in the shuffle. And I think a lot of moms do. And I think it's something that we have to really start to encourage other moms to prioritize themselves in whatever way that means. Like I have a friend who decided before she even gave birth, she was like, I'm not breastfeeding. I know that it's something that's going to be really great ultimately, and they say it's going to be great. But for me, I know that for me to prioritize my own mental health, breastfeeding is not going to be the right choice for me. And she knew that about herself. And I really appreciated that about her, because it wasn't like, people are telling me I should, so I'll just do it. It was like, no, I know that this is not going to work for me, so I'm not going to do it. And I really, really appreciated that about her. And it's something that I really hope to bring more of into my relationship with Carver, because I think ultimately it's going to make me a better mom, you know?
No, I love that. I love that you shared that. Thank you for sharing that, because that is, and I'm sure Chloe's going to touch on this more and more in the next episode about breastfeeding. But, you know, you really do have to figure out what works for you and your baby and your child, and give yourself grace about it.
I would say that one like big thing, don't be afraid to ask for help. People at the beginning are so generous and like people want to help, and especially like what we were going through with the pandemic and like, you know, no family and friends can't even come round. But I remember Corey, like one time I was like, can you please go to Trader Joe's for me? It's just so overwhelming, especially when it was just us two. We don't have a car. You can't just go like grocery shopping. Trying to go grocery shopping with a baby on the subway is just like a lot. So I think don't be afraid to just reach out to people, even you're not bothering anyone, like people want to help you. And also, as hard as it is, just for me anyway, I think I was unaware that I just need to let the first 3 months be what the first 3 months are going to be. And I remember my godmother's daughter actually was like, just get through the first 3 months. And I was like, on week 2, 3 months? I got to get through the first 3 months? What? But unfortunately, I feel like it's kind of true. It takes a while for them to figure themselves out. They're not going to be, unless you're lucky, they're not going to be just sleeping through the night, you know. So give yourself that grace period. And one final thing, I think it's important for people to know that everyone's going to go through a different journey. Everyone's going to experience things with their baby that are nerve-wracking. She nearly fell and banged her head, but I caught her. That you're worried about, and for us, we'll probably talk about this at some point on another episode. It was her poo. The girl would not poo. Again, another thing that I'm sure parents are like, oh my gosh, all we're doing is changing diapers. And yeah. Meanwhile, we're like, can she do a poo? Is she going to poo ever? You know, it was literally like every 8 to 10 days before she'd go. And it was so stressful, and we worried so much, and we're still going through it now. It will figure itself out, and she's fine. She's developing fine. But the amount of wasted energy on stressing over that was probably unnecessary. And so I think that's like a big thing. And another friend of ours is going through like a spit up problem. And it's stressful. But I think as long as they're developmentally doing what they need to do. Yeah, you cheeky little thing. There's a lot to stress out about, but is it worth it in the long run? Probably not. Look at this one. She's on
just
her own.
Holding her by her own balls.
Yes. So listeners, full disclaimer, a part of what we discussed when we were creating our podcast is that we wanted to also just be able to show and have you hear the realities of what our life is with the kids, whether they'll be screaming, spitting up, or running around. We wanted that to be a part of the world. So you will see that and you will hear that. Just so you know, it's on purpose. we don't want to hide it, because we're like, if we want this to be showing the realities and to talk about the realities, this is a part of the reality. And so I just wanted to put that out there. So the thing that the advice I would like to give are some comfort tools for the postpartum phase. For sure, Corey gave me a great one, which was witch hazel pads. Corey, if you want to explain to everyone, you know, what is it? Is it a witch sickle? What is it?
They're called Padsicles.
Padsicles. They are heaven sent.
They feel incredible.
Yes. We stand by the Padsicle, okay? Yeah. Corey, go ahead and explain to the people what a Padsicle is, okay?
Here's what a Padzicle is, people. You get yourself a pad, a maxi pad, any type of pad, and you lather her in a bunch of witch hazel, like squeeze it all in there. And there's a lot of other things you can put in. You can put some lavender, you can put aloe, like you can mix a lot of different things, just like all comforting, cooling liquids and oils. And then you freeze those things. You fold it back up, you put it back in the little paper that the pad comes in, so they're nice and organized. And then you put them in the freezer. And I'm telling you, I was wearing those Padsicles for weeks after I gave birth. It was the only thing that really gave comfort down there. And it's just like, for sitting, for all those things, it just made everything a lot more comfortable. And the sort of cooling element of it really helped to soothe all the wounds and the pain I was feeling down there. So get yourself some Padsicles. My husband made them for me actually like 3 days before I went into labor. We were like sitting on the bed and just like making a whole bunch of them. And I still didn't have enough. So just make as many as you literally can and stuff them in your freezer.
Definitely was a thing I wish I had coming out of the hospital. Also, one other thing, what's the matter? Bookie, 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 bookie. Also, one other thing that I would like to offer up into the space for people to get is a sitz bath, which seems so like common sense after I got it. I was like, this is common sense. Get a sitz bath. And I think the company's called Earth Mama. They actually sell like a sitz bath tea that you can put in there. Oh, okay. That you can put in there. Anything else you want to offer up?
A peri bottle is amazing.
Yes. I love the Freedom.
More specific, I was just about to say Freedom Mama Peri bottle. Because of the way the tube is curved, I highly recommend it.
It's just like so helpful. And also another thing that I found amazing was getting just some packs, the gel packs that you can heat or freeze. Being so cheeky for your boobs.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I actually had something too that I really loved. It was the Lavie. It's the company's called Lavie, Lavie. And they have like a lot of different massagers specifically for your breasts, like for clogged ducts and all of that. And so they have ones that actually heat up that you can sort of leave on your breast while you're feeding to help drop your flow. And then they have another massager that it's the one that I have that I actually keep in the shower. And it's kind of like a trigger point one. So like when I was having moments where I felt like my breasts were like super full and he wasn't necessarily fully emptying them, I was able to massage before I manually released some milk, and it was so helpful. So again, the company's called Lavie, and they're waterproof, so you can use them in the shower, you can do whatever, and it's super easy to like sort of put them on while you're feeding. And I think in the beginning, when you're still trying to figure out breastfeeding, like avoiding the clogged ducts is like really the thing that I was trying to avoid. So I was just like massaging the crap out of my breasts to try to make sure like nothing got stuck up there. And that was—
I wish I'd known about that. I just used an electric toothbrush, which was
same difference.
Yeah, the clogged ducts are real.
Yeah, that's not something that you want to experience if you can avoid it. So having the massagers are really helpful.
Mm. And then also just like, I mean, people talk about this all the time, but just seriously having food.
Oh my God.
Having food, especially, oh my gosh, because when I gave birth, it was like at the beginning of the pandemic. Corey, remember again, we went to, is it called BJ's?
Yes, we went to BJ's.
And just got like loads of like food, because obviously it was at the beginning and no one knew, is there going to be food in the supermarkets? What's happening? And you can't get like a delivery because all the deliveries are full up. But I would definitely say that poor Kyle just was like cooking 24/7, it felt like, which, I mean, poor Kyle. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Poor Chloe.
He's fine.
He's fine. But it's a lot for them because they don't get to have the same bond that we get with the baby. And then they feel like all they're doing is looking after us, which is what they have to do at the beginning.
Yeah. That's a big thing. The food, like we did a meal train. And I know, Shanika, you can probably talk about you having the pre-made meals, which I kind of wish I had done. Like, I kind of wish we had done like some sort of meal delivery service where we could just like pop things in the oven. But we had a meal train, which I loved, of having people commit to certain days of providing us with food. And that was so helpful. My best friend Grace was sending us groceries every week, and like, sort of piggybacking off of what Chloe said with just not being afraid to ask for help. Like that was a huge thing of not having to worry about eating. And you're so hungry in the beginning, like you're so thirsty and you're so hungry all the time. And the last thing you want to think about is like, what am I going to eat? And like, who's going to make it? And for both Wayne and I, it was really helpful to not have to think about that, because he was also tired as well. So to be able to just like have stuff delivered and know like, oh, such and such is going to have us send us Thai food tonight. So we don't have to worry about that. And like such and such is going to send us Mexican tomorrow. Like it just was really, really helpful to not, it's just one less thing to have to think about. And when you're in that haze of the first couple of weeks, you do not want to be thinking about what you want to eat, because you're going to be starving and it's probably going to make you more irritated if you can't figure out what you want to eat. So it's super helpful.
I wanted to say meal prep service. I used a meal prep service and it was the best thing that I could have ever done. So super, super helpful. Highly recommend. And last but not least, a freaking donut. One of those donut holes that you can sit on.
I never got that.
No.
Yes.
Really helpful for you?
Very, very helpful, especially those people that experience stitches. You want to get the donut. But because my son is going insane, Corey or Chloe, would you like to close us out? This has been wonderful.
Yes. It's been so amazing. I feel like every time we all talk, there's so much that I feel like I'm learning. We're all learning so much from each other. And just to be able to have this reference as a new mom, I just think will be so helpful. So I'm just so happy that we've been able to share and be open and honest and raw and all the things, because that is what motherhood is. It is raw and unfiltered. There is no pretty Instagram filters for this shit. So thank you guys so much for chatting with us and going along on this ride to talk about the first 48. Please make sure to follow us on our social media channels on Instagram and on YouTube. And we're looking forward to chatting with all of you all next week.
Yay!
To stay connected to all things mother, follow us on Instagram at motherlove_. That's MUTHALOVE_. And while you're at it, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on our YouTube and podcast platform pages. Thanks for listening.